This is the Bible Book Club.
And we're in the book of Numbers.
Welcome to the club. In chapters 11 and 12, poor Moses was dealing with the Israelites' scary, fast transition from faith to defiance, and that was happening a lot, unfortunately, for Moses. They started complaining, like they often did, about the hardships at Taberah. Then they complained about the lack of meat. And then Miriam and Aaron complained about Moses' superior position with God.
Moses was definitely under attack last episode, and that is not going to change.
Those Israelites were a bunch of whiners.
I know. Just wait to see how angry God gets. All right. This episode, our people are camped at the very edge of Canaan in the desert of Paran at Kadesh Barnea. And we have a map of this area in the show notes, so you can just picture them there in your head. We are poised at the very edge of the heart of the book of Numbers. In this episode, a generation of people lose the opportunity of a lifetime and a lifetime of opportunity. In this episode, one single moment of weakness is going to lead to a life of wandering in the wilderness. As one commentary I read put it, God has time and the wilderness has sand, meaning God has the time for a disbelieving generation to die, and the wilderness has enough sand for them to be buried in one by one. All right, who are the characters in this episode? Along with God, Moses, and Aaron, there are a few new characters who have a role in this scene. There are the 12 leaders from the 12 tribes who are younger, stronger men who can handle the mission they're going to be sent on. Two of those 12 leaders are Joshua and Caleb. Now, Joshua has a different name. He's called Hoshea, but Moses gives him the new name Joshua. This is a fatherly action on Moses' part, similar to what God did with Abraham. It marked Joshua as special to Moses, and it also marked him for greatness, which he is going to have. He's going to get a book of his own in the Bible. Caleb was the other of the 12. Caleb is mentioned over 30 times in the Old Testament. He will be a hero here in this episode and in the future. Caleb has a super interesting lineage. In Numbers 32, his father, Jephunneh, is called the Kenizzite. This may be because the line of Judah comes from Judah's daughter-in-law, Tamar, a Kenizzite, and the Kenizzites were Canaanite people. Now, if you missed season 1 of Bible Book Club, let me go over this. Tamar was married to Judah's oldest son, but the oldest son died without children, and the rule back then was to give the widow to another son, which Judah did, but that son died too. And Judah did not want to give Tamar to his third son. So he sent her back to her father, and she did not like that because then she's just waiting there, a widow, waiting to have children with the third son. So she dressed up as a prostitute and tricked her father-in-law into sleeping with her. Then she gave birth to twins, and the line of Judah continues with her son, twin one, named Perez, who, of course, leads way down the lineage to Christ. Love that story, and you got to know there's lots of these because God specifically peppered in all kinds of people into the lineage of Christ, even those who dress up like a prostitute. It gives us all a lot of hope, especially those of us with crazy families. Long story short, Caleb is going to be a major player in defeating his great, I don't know how many great times, grandmother Tamar's people. So he is half Israelite, but he's also got a little bit of Kenizzite in there, and he's actually going to defeat those people.
I'm so glad you reminded us of all that because I was with us in that episode, and I didn't remember it all.
Exactly. There's so many really cool people in Christ's lineage, and that's what I love about just the way God creatively uses different people. Now, Joshua is from the tribe of Ephraim, from Joseph's line, and Caleb is from the tribe of Judah, as I just mentioned, and they together represent the future strength of the nation of Israel, because Ephraim will be the powerhouse in northern Israel, and Judah will be the powerhouse in southern Israel. So 2 great men are going to come out of this group of 12 spies. Now, here is the mission. Now that you know the characters, here's the mission. Simply, the spies are to explore Canaan. Remember, we're on the very edge. We're looking at Canaan. So the spies are to go in and explore. Specifically, they're instructed to check out the land, the people, the towns, and to bring back samples of the produce. Starting in chapter 13.
The Lord said to Moses, "Send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send one of its leaders." So, at the Lord's command, Moses sent them out from the desert of Paran. All of them were leaders of the Israelites. These are their names. From the tribe of Reuben, Shammah, son of Zakur. From the tribe of Simeon, Shaphat, son of Hori. From the tribe of Judah, Caleb, son of Jephunneh. From the tribe of Issachar, Igal, son of Joseph. From the tribe of Ephraim, Hoshea, son of Nun. From the tribe of Benjamin, Palti, son of Raphu. From the tribe of Zebulun, Gaddiel, son of Zodi. From the tribe of Manasseh, a tribe of Joseph, Gadi, son of Susi. From the tribe of Dan, Amiel, son of Gamali. From the tribe of Asher, Sethur, son of Michael. From the tribe of Naphtali, Nahabi, son of Voshvi. From the tribe of Gad, Guel, son of Maki. These are the names of the men Moses sent to explore the land. Moses gave Hosea, son of Nun, the name of Joshua. When Moses sent them to explore Canaan, he said, "Go up through Negev and on into the hill country. See what the land is like and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees in it or not? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land." It was the season for the first ripe grapes. So they went up and explored the land from the desert of Zin as far as Rehob toward Lebo Hamath. They went up through the Negev and came to Hebron, where Ahman, Eshai, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, lived. Hebron had been built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. When they reached the valley of Eshcol, they cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes. 2 of them carried it on a pole between them, along with some pomegranates and figs. That place was called the Valley of Eshcol because the cluster of grapes the Israelites cut off there. At the end of 40 days, they returned from exploring the land.
All right, let's analyze the Canaan reconnaissance. The Lord told Moses to send a team to explore the land. We're going to learn from Deuteronomy that apparently the people had also asked Moses to send forth spies. What probably happened is that the people were afraid to go to war, so they asked Moses to send out spies, knowing it would buy them time. Then Moses petitioned God, and God gave instructions. The journey was about 250 miles each way, making it a 40-day round trip. The first city they came to was a big deal. It was Hebron. Hebron is one of the oldest cities on earth. It was near Hebron that God first promised Abraham that his descendants would inherit the land. From season 1 of Bible Book Club in Genesis, we know that the only piece of land Abraham ever owned was a burial cave he bought for Sarah when she died at Hebron. Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah were all buried there. Caleb, our sweet Caleb, will claim and conquer this revered city 45 years after he first sees it in this spy incident. The land was so rich that the cluster of grapes that they brought back had to be carried by 2 men. Today, and you can Google this online, the logo for Israel's Department of Tourism is of 2 men, Caleb and Joshua, carrying the grapes between them. So they still hold to just the vineyards of days gone by. All right, so let's talk about the report on the exploration. The spies are about to come back, and the report they give is given to the whole Israelite community, which kind of sounds impossible because there's 2 million of them, but it was probably the leaders gathered from the clans, gathered closely around, close enough to hear, and I picture it like that telephone game. They just kind of pass it back to the people in the back, and it just keeps going. So the whole community hears the report, and that's important to know because the whole community is going to react. There are two sides to the reconnaissance report. There is a right side and there is a wrong side. And that is the way with life. We are all on a path of choices between right and wrong, and the spies are going to divide on this.
Verse 26, they came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them and the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account. We went into the land which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit.
The fruit was amazing. We heard it was such a huge cluster, they had to carry it on a pole between them. How long had it been since they had grapes? Over a year at least. They were excited. Oh, and there is milk and honey, just as God promised Abraham. The report must have been music to Moses' ears. He was probably over the moon that the goal was finally in sight. Now, if he could just get 2 million people over the finish line. But,
verse 28, but the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in Negev. The Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan. Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. But the men who had gone up with him said, we can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, the land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak came from Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them.
But fear. And if you can just imagine that fear rippling back through the crowd until it reaches the very edge of the camp where there's just a few left to hear it. Everyone heard. There is milk and honey, but the cities are fortified. The land devours the living. The people are powerful. They are descendants of Anak. They are stronger. They are Nephilim. We are grasshoppers. The more they talk, the bigger the story grows until it is just dramatic fiction. The Nephilim were giants or mighty men from Genesis 6. In Season 1, Episode 7, we discussed the 3 theories of who the Nephilim were. I'm not going to get into it. However, the Anakites cannot be Nephilim because all of the Nephilim would have died in Noah's flood. The spies were exaggerating because they were afraid of what they saw. And what they saw had become bigger in their eyes than God. The only thing being devoured in this story is their faith. That is the problem. A strong fear will devour a weak faith. As the fear takes hold of every single heart, there are only 2 who remain firm, only 2 who remember the power and the promises of God, Caleb and Joshua. Now, Caleb insists that the Israelites can certainly do it, because in Caleb's mind, God is still a part of the equation. The Israelites plus God equaled victory over the Egyptians. Therefore, the Israelites plus God will equal victory over the Canaanites. There is a sharp contrast between fearful leaders and faithful leaders. What drives your leadership? The leadership of your family, friends, employees? Is it driven by faith or fear? This is something that got me thinking this week because as a mom, sometimes I can be led by fear.
Well, I think another question for listeners is which side? You mentioned there's the right side and the wrong side to be on. Which side do you want to be on? Do you want to be like Caleb, who trusts in God and believes that we can do this and inspires people to do greater things that they might have not been able to do on their own without God? Or do you want to be like the guys who were scared and didn't have faith and then went and spread a whole bunch of what really essentially are just rumors. And embellishments about false embellishments about what the land was like. And then you get everybody discouraged. We've all been around those kind of people who are just pessimistic, glass half empty people. And I don't know about you, but I would rather be a glass half full person.
Exactly. With God, all things are possible. That was Caleb's kind of heart. All right. The problem with fear is it leads to panic. The fear spread faster than a fire, inflamed inflaming panic and consuming the crowd. Fear that leads to panic often in our minds creates this thing called a fight or flight response in the brain. God had prepared Israel to fight, but the people chose instead to take flight. They panicked. And in their panic, they have forgotten how God defeated the Egyptian army without one of them even lifting a single sword. In their panic, they can no longer see the truth. They are running blind. The result is a rebellion in chapter 14.
That night, all the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, "If only we had died in Egypt or in the wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt?" And they said to each other, "We should choose a leader and go back to Egypt."
Panic makes you irrational. The Israelites are past the point of rational thinking. From Exodus 1 to this mission of the spies, there has been but one purpose for them. God redeemed them from Egypt to fulfill his promise to Abraham, to make them a great nation and give them the promised land. He chose them to be his people and to dwell among them. How could they forget? Shoot, day or night, they can see God's presence in the cloud over them by day and the fire warming them by night. How could they forget God? He is literally illuminating the camp as they speak because it said it was at nighttime. Can they not see him? No, they cannot because they are in a panic. It is amazing what you miss when you're in a panic. Note, fear and panic will blind you to the truth that is right in front of you. Now, irrational thinking leads to foolish and even fatal ideas. The Israelites are spewing nonsense. They blame Moses and Aaron for their situation. They wish they had died in Egypt or the wilderness. They believe their children will be taken as plunder and killed. They think they should go back to Egypt, and they want a new leader. Not one mention of God. It's as if he never existed. This is blasphemy. Moses and Aaron are going to fall out, literally.
Verse 5, Then Moses and Aaron fell face down in front of the whole Israelite assembly gathered there. Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had explored the land, tore their clothes and said to the entire Israelite assembly, "The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them."
Okay, well, I mentioned that fear can lead to panic. Well, faith leads to fulfillment. Moses and Aaron are experiencing a totally different kind of fear, the fear of God. To fall on your face in the Old Testament is a response of worship and awe. In this case, Moses and Aaron probably sense the presence of God, and the awe is probably in anticipation of God's wrath in the form of the earth trembling and swallowing them whole, or perhaps a consuming fire. One never knows what God's going to do because of what they just said. It was so blasphemous. Now, Joshua and Caleb, distraught over being part of this mission and feeling bad because the report has gone so awry, it's now turned to mutiny, tear their clothes, which is a sign of deep distress or mourning. And they attempt to remind the people that God is with them. What God has promised in Genesis 15, when he revealed his plan to Abraham is happening, just as God said it would. This is what it said in 15. Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Know for certain that for 400 years, check, your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there."
Already happened.
Check. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions.
It happened.
You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age.
Already happened.
In the 4th generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure.
Check, check, and check.
And that's what Caleb was trying to argue with them. Remember, their protection is gone. Joshua and Caleb remind them that the sin of the Amorites has reached its full measure and their protection is gone. The only thing they need to do is to please the Lord. Joshua and Caleb's faith is in sharp contrast with Israel's fear. The weak faith of the people makes them puppets controlled by the strings of fear, yanking them in all different kinds of directions. While Joshua and Caleb are rocks of faith, unafraid of the world and everything they see in it.
Verse 10, but the whole assembly talked about stoning them.
Whoops! Stoning Joshua and Caleb? That's enough. The people have gone too far.
Yeah, and if you, like us, are sitting here listening to these fickle Israelites complain yet again and say ridiculous, absurd things like, oh, we should just go back to Egypt, which is the place where they were oppressed and mistreated and beaten and killed.
Or I should have died in the wilderness.
Silly, ridiculous things. If that's frustrating to you like it is to us, one thing that you should think about, or you might want to think about if God might be convicting you about something that maybe we sound this way to God. I know in my life, there are times when I'm complaining to God in a way that he's probably like,
rolling his eyes.
Would you please stop? I've shown you again and again, because he has. He's shown me again and again in my life that he will get me through it, that he's there with me in the valley, just like he's there with me in the mountain. And if there's something that I'm doing that I need to be convicted of, an old sin that I keep going back to again and again and again, why don't I just stop and turn around and just trust God and praise him through the situation instead of complaining about it?
Yeah, our sin may not look like Israelites, but it's there. Well, stoning was actually a consequence of unrighteousness. And in this case, God is not happy about the assembly talking about stoning Joshua and Caleb because they were not unrighteous. So God intercedes with a chilling response.
Then the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the Israelites. The Lord said to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me in spite of all the signs I have performed among them? I will strike them down with a plague and destroy them, but I will make you into a nation greater and stronger than they.
The voice of truth freezes the fiery rebellion. Can you just imagine it? Moses and Aaron are already flat on the floor, silently praying. They're probably afraid to look up for fear of what they might see happen to the people. I am sure Joshua and Caleb have fallen prostrate too, following Moses and Aaron. And the people, they must be cowering. If they were afraid of the Canaanites from just hearing the spies report, then actually seeing the glory of the Lord descend must have scared them into a faint. God is done with the Israelites. The verse said that God's glory appears to all the Israelites, but he ignores them. The covenant, their relationship, it's over in his mind. He addresses his comments to Moses only. It's a crosstalk moment. You know, when two parents have a conversation about the child who just misbehaved, and they have that conversation right in front of the child so that the child can overhear the entire conversation and have a better understanding of exactly what they did wrong without the parent even talking to them. God is talking directly to Moses about what the Israelites did, and God is justifiably angry. This is not the first time the people have defied him. And if it is Egypt they want and the wilderness, well, then they can get what Pharaoh got, a deadly plague. This let's start over threat happened before in the golden calf incident. In Exodus 32:9, God responded in exactly the same way. He said, I will destroy them and make you, Moses, into a great nation. But Moses intercedes again, as he did in Exodus 32.
And I just am hoping that I am convicted enough to turn from my negativity before God is done with me. As you said, God is done with the Israelites at this point. And the good news is God is never done with us, thankfully, because of Jesus. Jesus paid the price for all of the things that we do. Even though he might get frustrated with us, he'll never just be done with us again.
Correct.
But there was a time in which earlier, I believe it was when we were in Exodus, Susan, you compared Moses as a character as a man to Jesus, that he would intercede on the Israelites' behalf often with God. And here again, we're about to read that he's doing that same thing. So as you read this, just think about that juxtaposition between Moses and Jesus as you hear these words. Verse 13, Moses said to the Lord, "Then the Egyptians will hear about it. By your power, you brought these people up from among them, and they will tell the inhabitants of this land about it. They have already heard that you, Lord, are with these people, and that you, Lord, have been seen face to face, that your cloud stays over them, and that you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. If you put all these people to death, leaving no one alive, the nations who have heard this report about you will say, the Lord was not able to bring these people into the land he promised them on oath, so he slaughtered them in the wilderness. Now, may the Lord's strength be displayed just as you have declared. The Lord is slow to anger, abounding in love, and forgiving sin and rebellion. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation. In accordance with your great love, forgive the sin of these people just as you have pardoned them from the time they left Egypt until now."
Okay, let's talk about Moses' intercession. It is immediate. This loyal man, Moses, does not even consider God's offer to trade these crazy Israelites in for a new group of people. Moses uses the same argument as he did in Exodus because he knows God's thinking. Moses is so in line with the heart of God. He says, the Egyptians will hear about it, and then the nations will hear about it. He knows that God's reputation as the one true God is so important for the future gospel. And Moses' desire is to protect God's reputation so that all will hear about him. Moses also appeals to God's character, that he's abounding in love and forgiveness.
I think that was such a steady way to react, like a non-emotional, and this is an emotionally charged moment. And yet here's Moses so calm, so composed, but God, let me just remind you, and
he
God
sticks to it.
Yeah, and that's really great because I think if I was Moses, I would have been so sick of these darn Israelites. I would be like, fine, God, go ahead and do it. Just leave me Caleb and Joshua and like a couple women. I'll start over. I promise I'll do it again better next time.
Moses does get angry several times in his journey, but when he does, you kind of laugh, and we're going to laugh in one coming up. But I love how he has a steady Eddie. Yeah. Like his heart is so in line with God's that even when God's angry, he can, reiterate to God what God's heart already says. These are my people. I want the nations to hear about them. I want them to be my people and for them to become the people that bring forth this seed. And why start over? We've got these people. Let's work with them. Yep. Now, God's response to Moses, however, is painful.
Verse 20, the Lord replied, I have forgiven them as you asked. Nevertheless, as surely as I live and as surely as the glory of the Lord fills the whole earth, not one of those who saw my glory and the signs I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, but who disobeyed me and tested me 10 times, not one of them will ever see the land I promised on oath to their ancestors. No one who has treated me with contempt will ever see it.
There is a disobedience list of 10 times, and it's largely from Exodus 14 through 32, at the Red Sea, at Marah, in the Desert of Sin, at Rephidim, at Mount Sinai, with a few more recent acts of disobedience from Numbers at Taberah, Kibroth, Hatava, and now at Kadesh.
Verse 24, but because my servant Caleb has a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land he went to, and his descendants will inherit it. Since the Amalekites and the Canaanites are living in the valleys, turn back tomorrow and set out toward the desert along the route to the Red Sea.
All right, so here's the first painfully ironic consequence. The Israelites are at the very edge of the promised land, remember. They are so close. But instead, God is going to give them what they said they wanted. They said they would rather go back. They said they'd rather die in the wilderness. So God is sending them back to the wilderness toward the Red Sea, to the very place where God saved them from their terror of Pharaoh. Back toward Egypt because they said they would rather be there than in the big, bad scary promised land. One moment of weak faith, and the Israelites are going to spend their lifetime wandering in the wilderness.
Well, if there's anything convicting, I don't know anything better to convict me than that, because what I complain about, God just might actually let me have.
He might give it to you. And they're at the very edge of the promised land, everything they had hoped for.
Verse 26, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, how long will this wicked community grumble against me? I have heard the complaints of these grumbling Israelites. So tell them, as surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do to you the very thing I heard you say. In the wilderness, your bodies will fall. Every one of you 20 years old or more who was counted in the census and who has grumbled against me, not one of you will enter the land I swore with uplifted hand to make your home, except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, son of Nun. As for your children that you said would be taken as plunder, I will bring them in to enjoy the land you have rejected. But as for you, your bodies will fall in the wilderness. Your children will be shepherds here for 40 years, suffering for your unfaithfulness until the last of your bodies lies in the wilderness. For 40 years, 1 year, for each of the 40 days you explore the land, you will suffer your sins and know what it is like to have me against you. I, the Lord, have spoken, and I will surely do these things to this whole wicked community, which has banded together against me. They will meet their end in the wilderness. Here they will die.
The second painfully ironic consequence is that the Israelites said they would rather die in the wilderness, and so they shall. Not one person over 20 will see the promised land except Joshua and Caleb. The third painfully ironic consequence is that for every day of the 40-day spy mission, there will be a year of wandering. So now, when they were so close, it's now been delayed 40 years. 40 years of misery rather than a life of abundance in the promised land. Now think of them wandering in the sand. They will be living for their children because their only hope of Israel attaining the promised life is in their own death. The fourth painfully ironic consequence is that the children, the people we're afraid would die at the hands of the Canaanites, are actually going to be the only ones who will live in the land of the Canaanites.
Verse 36, so the men Moses had sent to explore the land, who returned and made the whole community grumble against him by spreading a bad report about it. These men who were responsible for spreading the bad report about the land were struck down and died of a plague before the Lord. Of the men who went to explore the land, only Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, survived.
The first to die of the disobedient older generation are the 10 spies whose lack of faith fueled the rebellion. Okay, you're not going to believe this one, but we're going to have another wrong again choice.
Verse 39, when Moses reported this to all the Israelites, they mourned bitterly. Early the next morning, they set out for the highest point in the hill country, saying, now we are ready to go up to the land the Lord promised. Surely we have sinned. But Moses said, why are you disobeying the Lord's command? This will not succeed. Do not go up, because the Lord is not with you. You will be defeated by your enemies, for the Amalekites and the Canaanites will face you there. Because you have turned away from the Lord, he will not be with you, and you will fall by the sword. Nevertheless, in their presumption, they went up toward the highest point in the hill country, though neither Moses nor the ark of the Lord's covenant moved from the camp. Then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who lived in the hill country came down and attacked them and beat them down all the way to Hormah.
Well, everything looks different in the morning. And the next day, picking grapes in the promised land looked a heck of a lot better than making bricks in Egypt, which is where they thought they were headed. So in a comic, oh, my bad moment, the people try to get back to the original plan, but without God. Like, hey, Caleb said we can do this, so let's try to do it. But this is a perfect example of the Israelites' problem. They still have no clue that God's plan only works if God is in it.
And how many times does that happen in our own lives?
Oh, gosh.
I mean, I confess it happens to me on way more times than I cared to admit. But unfortunately, we make those decisions too late, and God's already imposed the consequence.
Yep. Well, the heart of the book of Numbers is this very story. This is the watershed moment that sent the Israelites into the wilderness. The mistake was theirs, but the lesson is ours. Epic rebellion leads to epic consequences. A weak faith can lead to a lot of wandering. God has time, and the wilderness has sand.
What's a club without friends? If you're enjoying the Bible Book Club, why don't you share it? And then you can say, Welcome to the club. New episodes drop every Monday, and get all episodes now on Amazon Music. As always, head over to susanme.com/Bible Book Club for show notes from today's episode. Bible Book Club is hosted by Susan Merrill and Heather Rubio, edited by Buck Buchanan, produced by Hayley Mawat.